All right, good morning. This is day 18 of our reading plan, June the 18th. Today we read the chapter 10 of the Gospel of John and a passage of the Good Shepherd. There's actually two of his I am statements here. We need to think about both of those. First one is, he says, I am the door. And when he talks about the door, and he uses some of these language, you think about going in and going out. We think about the promised land, leading us into the promised land. We think about going in and going out, rising up and sitting down, like language that reminds us of Deuteronomy and the covenant there. And so the door is the idea of the door, a lot of Old Testament imagery there, but especially the door of the tabernacle. There was one door. Jesus says, I'm the door. He's talking about the only one. There's only one door, and that's him. There's only one way to eternal life. He also says, I am the good shepherd. And the idea of a shepherd is all the way through the Old Testament. Ezekiel, Jeremiah, all the way back in Genesis, there were shepherds, but especially Psalm 23. We know that one. And all through the Psalms, he says that we are the sheep of his pasture. And Jesus comes along and says that he is the good shepherd. The relationship that sheep have to shepherds is really amazing. They know his voice. They follow his voice. They run to his voice. They trust his voice because he's the one that's going to provide them the pasture. He's going to promise them abundant life and eternal life. Down in verse 28, he says eternal life. We see Jesus is celebrating the festival of dedication here, chapter 10, verse 22. That's what we call Hanukkah now. That's when the temple was rededicated after one of the Greek rulers, Antiochus Epiphanes, just decimated it, and so they rededicated the temple, and they had that festival. It goes all the way back to before Jesus was born. And while he's teaching there, he tells them such crazy stuff like he gets to give his sheep eternal life, and nobody's ever going to be able to snatch them out of his hand because he's the same as God, and they're going to try to kill him again. He actually gets away this time because he's not ready to lay down his life for the sheep. They still got more work to do. But they get just as upset because they know exactly what he's saying. He is proclaiming himself to be God. Now, there's a little passage in here, verse 34, where it says, I said you are gods. We have to make real clear distinction what Jesus meant there, because many false teachers are distorting that concept these days, thinking that people can be little gods. We are not little gods. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's referring to Psalm 86. Is it Psalm 86? Or no, Psalm 82, verse 6. He's referring to Psalm 82, which talks about human judges, and the idea that human judges need to make good decisions because they are put in place and they are standing for God. And these are clearly humans, because he says you're gods, but you're going to die. So they're mortal. These are human people he's talking about. And so Jesus is not saying we are little gods. He's saying God gives the right for humans to judge in his stand. So if God can give that right to a person, how much more appropriate is it for God to give that to Jesus? Because Jesus is God.